Hello, friends. Welcome to my studio here in sunny, beautiful Columbus, Ohio. It is abnormally warm here today. It is reading at 66. It's going to be 70 degrees and sunny, which I am not complaining about at all. Hope you all are doing well. I just wanted to introduce myself. My name is Jeremy Slagle. I'm a graphic designer and an illustrator, and I'm really looking forward to spending this next hour with you. Also, in case you didn't know, today is National Chili Day, so be sure to grab a bowl for lunch, and your coworkers will thank you this afternoon, I promise. So just want to say thank you to Adobe for giving me the opportunity to be with you all today, and thank you for joining us as well. And if you'd like to join our Adobe Live community, you can subscribe to the YouTube channel and you can follow us at Adobe Live on Instagram for the latest streams and updates and more. So just wanted to welcome Jess and Tim, Sam. Hi, Sam. Gareth, Robert. Hi, Beverly. Oh, Beverly said yesterday's class was great and she'd do a lemur after class. Oh my gosh, that's so great. Lemurs are also absolutely the cutest things on the planet. So I'm glad you had a chance to do that. And RB, Susan, Jess, thank you guys all for joining me today. So today is our final boot camp of the week, and we are going to talk about children's books. On Tuesday, I went through and showed you how I illustrate plants. Yesterday, I went through my process on how I illustrate animals, which obviously made Susan happy, which is great. And then today we're going to work on children's books. I've illustrated a few children's books, and I'm really, really excited about sharing some of those with you today. So just to show you real quick what I've been able to do in the past, these are two of the children's books I created. This first one is called Chin Up Chinchilla. It is, and the second book we did was called Hip Hooray Hippo. And they were both done with one of my favorite people in the world, Beth Stafford. And one of the things I want to share with you about that is that the most important thing is that you have a good story to illustrate around. I always wanted to illustrate a children's book, and I never had the opportunity. And my friend Beth had the sweetest little story, and she came to me and said, "Hey, let's do this." And I was like, "Yes, let's do this." We put together a Kickstarter campaign a few years ago, and we thought, is anyone going to buy this? Is anyone gonna be interested in this? And sure enough, after 5 days of a Kickstarter campaign, we were able to fully fund it. We thought we were going to have to go all 30 and maybe pitch in a couple at the end. But it was really, really exciting to see just how many people came out and supported us. So we did that first book. It was called Chin Up Chinchilla. And the second book we did is called Hip Hooray Hippo. And we're going to dig a little deeper into Hip Hooray Hippo today as well. So one of the things that's really cool is like I said, I always wanted to do children's books, and self-publishing a couple of books like this really opened the door. So I've actually been able to illustrate another children's book with an actual publisher, and I'm actually working on my second book with that same publisher now. So it's been super, super cool. It's just an encouragement to you. If there's something you want to do, find someone who wants to do it with you. And maybe you're not going to make any money doing it the first time. Maybe it's going to be something that you can put out on Kickstarter and have your friends support you, or your family, or the other people out there that are interested in children's books, or whatever your project is. And you really need to kind of like make that your priority if that's what you want to do, and it will open up doors for you. So very, very cool, especially what the internet and social media is able to do with you, is able to do today, to be able to kind of put the stuff that you're doing on people's radar. So like the last 2 days, much of what I'm going to share with you today will include using vector brushes, and using vector brushes has made a huge difference in my workflow and in my efficiency. And honestly, like, these books were the reason that I got into doing vector brushes in the first place. So there's a few different ways to get brushes on your computer if you're not familiar with it. And I'll just recap that real quickly. Let's go ahead and hop over to my screen. So there's a few different ways to do it. One way is to get some free brushes that Adobe has available for you right now. And they commissioned me to do this illustration based on some of the other animal illustrations I had done. And they also are giving away the whole brush pack that was created for this. Let me pull that up so you can kind of see that. It's these 7 brushes. So these 7 brushes right here are all that I'm using to create all the texture in this illustration. And so if you look down in the show notes below, you will find a link to be able to download those. You can just click the button. It goes right to the Adobe website. You'll actually have a little bit of a tutorial there. You can click the link and it automatically launches Illustrator and loads them right in for you, which is really, really convenient. You can also purchase them. I sell my brushes also on slagledesign.com. You can also buy them through Retro Supply Co., Creative Market, Gumroad. There's lots of all sorts of different places where you can pick them up. The other thing you can do is make them. It is like one of my favorite ways to do it, because what it allows you to do is create custom brushes that make your work stand out and kind of creates a cohesiveness across like all of your illustrations. So it just makes it very unique to you and your style. So I host a workshop. I'll be doing that a couple times this year. I've got actually three coming up this year scheduled currently. Also, link in the description below. There's a link to my workshop page where you can see the 3 opportunities to do that. So I'd love to have you for that. And you can just sign up and register there online. So like I said, today we're going to talk about children's books. I'm really, really excited to share this with you because it really is the project that kind of kickstarted my love for this illustration style and all of that. So let's see. Jess, nice of you to join us. Looks like there's a few more people joining the chat. Thank you guys for joining us. Also, just wanted to remind you that if you have any questions, feel free to drop them in here and I'll do my best to answer some of those as well. So let's head over here to my screen again and wanted to just kind of show you like everything good in life. When I'm working on a project, I always put mood boards together. And so, you know, having never illustrated a children's book before, I pulled some of my favorites, some of my like illustration heroes together, and Mary Blair is just definitely like right at the top. Now, obviously, everything she did was pre-computer. She was, if you're unfamiliar with Mary Blair's work, do yourself a favor and Google her later today. What I loved about her work is it's very modern, very in some ways simple, but in other ways very complex. She uses basic geometric shapes, and then she would use gouache and really cool texture brushes to fill in all of those as well. So the next slide I have here, and I just saw that pop up there. So Robert's asking, will your vectors work in Fresco? I don't believe they do. Unless there's a way to export Illustrator brushes to Fresco, I'm not sure that they do. In fact, I would probably say they don't, because I think they are now supported. Don't quote me on this, but I think they are supported for AI on the iPad, but that may be something you want to check out. Luke Flowers is another guy whose work just blows me away. I love his work. And as I started kind of compiling these different artists and designers that are illustrators that I liked, I started to notice some things that really resonated with me. And that's, again, those simple shapes and then using texture to kind of build and add some liveliness to it. The third one that I really love is Rob McClurkin. And I had the pleasure of meeting Rob at the Creative South conference a few years ago. And he has been such a big support and a helper to me as I've had lots of questions about children's book illustration. And one of the things he told me while we were hanging out that evening is he's like, do you work in Photoshop? And I'm like, I use Photoshop for photos and I don't really illustrate in Photoshop. And he's just said, a lot of the children's book publishers today are requiring and really leaning into that more analog feel that you get from work that you do in Photoshop. And I was kind of like, had one of those like wah wah moments where I kind of like decided to hang my head and walk away slowly. And then I realized, you know what, I'm gonna make it a challenge to be able to take Illustrator and do my best to do this, to create a similar style or a similar look where you add some texture in to vectors. Because I'm just a vector guy. I'm constantly creating logos and identities, and that's just Illustrator is just my house. It's where I live, and I wanted to try to keep it there. So that really kicked off my whole quest to do this. So I am going to, I know you weren't expecting to be read a book today, but I'm going to actually read this book to you today by Beth Stafford. And what I want you to look for are a couple things. Look for the two C's: composition. Where are the illustrations and the text leading your eye? Like, where are you seeing wide shots versus close-up shots? Continuity. Where are some things that are creating repeating assets, colors and textures and such? So I'm going to just go ahead and read this out loud to you, and we'll go from here. If you see a hippo and she's very excited, remember that sometimes it's so hard to fight it. Maybe she won first prize at the fair. Maybe confetti fell down from the air. Maybe she spotted a bright shooting star. Maybe she ate a whole candy bar. Maybe she found a pug that got loose. Maybe she finally lost her first tooth. Maybe she found a coin in her pocket. Maybe she flew in a shiny space rocket. Maybe she conquered her fear of the slide. Maybe she knows that she's special inside. Remember the days when you have felt great? And join her in jumping. Go celebrate. There's no reason the fun has to end. Happiness is best when it's shared with a friend. One of the ideas that we were trying to help kids understand in this was the idea of empathy. In our first book, in Chin Up Chinchilla, we help kids understand what it means to engage with someone where everything has gone bad for that character. In the second book, which I know a lot of adults, even I can understand the struggle with this, but that is seeing someone else where everything is doing good, like where everything is going great for them. They're winning all the awards and they always seem happy. Like, rather than, feeling jealous, how do we celebrate with them and engage with them? And so that was really the idea behind this book. But you'll notice that throughout the book, we have a lot of pacing things going on. So on this, for instance, in this spread, the copy is on the left, the photo is on the right. Here we're bringing the copy or the illustration was on the right. Here we're bringing the copy all the way through from one spread to the other. Image on the left, copy on the right. And on this one, we initially kind of had this sketched out where our hippo was kind of coming in from the side. And I just really wanted to break it up. One of the things I like about books, especially picture books, is not in being able to anticipate. Well, the first time you read that book and you're flipping through it, you want the kids to kind of have to like look for things and search for things, and it should be unexpected. Books where you have the picture on the left and the copy on the right and every single spread, to me, just start getting boring after a while. So I am going to, actually, I think I have one more slide here to show you. I do. So the other thing I would encourage you to do if you are doing a children's book is to start with sketches. When you start with sketches, it helps you just really get kind of a sense of the holistic feel of the whole book. You'll notice that some of these changed when we got into them a little bit deeper, and some of them look almost exactly the same. Our kitten on that one spread there became a pug. And the reason we did that is it's a callback to our first book where a dog got lost. And so we kind of try to create some ways to tie the two together. And even on that bottom one in the center there where we've got the hippo on the slide, you can see that was kind of the initial idea. But I really, really liked the idea of bringing the camera above and shooting it from a completely different angle. It just added a very different vibe to the whole thing. Hey, Sam, thanks for the compliment there. Thank you. I love sketching. Sketching is so important. And that actually is going to lead us into our next section here. So what I did was I went ahead and grabbed one of the spreads that kind of has a lot going on. And one of the other things you should have noticed in that first one was this idea of repeating elements. These leaves and the foliage that I have created kind of surrounding on this first spread, what we're trying to do is really set the scene for where our hippo is and who are these other characters and kind of, you know, what's their role in it. So the idea for this was to say like, okay, it's kind of like a jungle setting, we're outdoors, but we really wanted to draw our focus to the hippo herself over on the right there. So what I want to do today is kind of just pick apart this illustration, show you kind of how I go about doing this, some tips and tricks that I've learned along the way, things I wish I had learned and known when I started doing my first children's book. So let me just go ahead and scroll down here. Colors are incredibly important. One of the things that I found is sticking to a good base color palette is really, really essential to kind of pulling the whole illustration and like the whole thing together. If you go from one spread to the next and the colors are different, it doesn't help with a cohesion that you should have in a book like this. You want the kids to feel like drawn into it and you want to keep them in that land and in that world. So what I did was I created just some really fun base colors, and then I created some dark shade colors. I mentioned this before, you'll notice there's no black anywhere in this color palette. I don't like using black. If I'm going to use shades, I'm going to use a cool dark neutral like a dark blue, or a warm dark neutral like a dark brown. And then I'm going to use those to overlay, multiply over, and just use that to kind of pull my shadows out. And you can kind of see there's just so many different ways you can use these colors to mix and match them to get a lighter green out of that yellow and green, you know, bring out some highlights, bring in some shadows. So this is a great way to do it. If you're looking for a good resource for trying to find a good color palette, like a starting color palette, I always recommend checking out color.adobe.com. There's lots of different options there, and you're sure to find something that'll at least get you in the right direction. And then sometimes I'll tweak a little bit and kind of dial it in a little bit from there. So next, I want to talk to you a little bit about how I create these brushes. So you'll notice that we've got single color brushes and pre-colored brushes. All of these that are showing up here that are the solid color are basically just black. When you create them, they are black. It's the only time I use black in my illustration work. But what I'm going to do is just go ahead and kind of recreate one of these to kind of show you my process. This one, this blue one on the top right, let's just grab the oval tool, and I am going to make it black, no line. And then I'm just going to duplicate this down, hit the E button, which is allows me to transform it. And we're going to leave it right there. And then I'm going to grab my rectangle tool, create a stem. Let's just copy and paste that. And we'll rotate it over here as well. Kind of line it up with our other brush. Actually, what I'll do, just keep those nice and lined up. I'll center those. My zoom controls are getting in the way of my top navigation bar up there. Sorry, I had to bump that down a little. Rotate that. And then okay. So then we'll just duplicate that down a couple times. We have 4 there, we got 4 there. And I'm just going to duplicate this over to here. Great. And it can't hurt if you want to just kind of bump these around a little bit, move them, make them a little bit more organic. So unless you, sometimes people like them super geometric like this. If you want to just kind of then, manipulate them a little bit, you can do that. I'm going to go ahead and group that. select all of this, and we're going to center them. All right, so pull this stem down just a little bit more. And then one of my favorite things to do to really kind of add that kind of hand-drawn look to my brushes, into my illustrations in here, is I'm just going to select all of this. I'm going to go up here to Effect, Distort, Transform, Roughen. I mentioned this the other day. The first time I ever turned the Roughen palette on and tried it, I was like, why would I ever use this? Because this is the first thing you're presented when it pops up. Don't let this freak you out. I don't know why anyone would ever do this. But what I do is I hit the absolute button, I hit the smooth button, and then I can dial this back a little bit. So I'm going to maybe make this a 0.01, maybe a 0.03. And then I'm going to bump the detail up a bit. And you can see that it just adds a really nice kind of random organic pattern to the whole thing. That may be a little much. So if you do this and you get a little too much, you can always head over to your appearances panel. This is non-destructive, so you can always just click the roughen button and you can go back in, and I'm going to add a little more detail, and I'm going to knock this down to like 0.01. Let's see how that looks. It's not quite enough. Let's go 2. Yeah, that's a lot better. So basically I've just kind of recreated this. Now to make the brush version of it, I'm going to just rotate it to the side. I like rotating things to the side before I drag brushes. I don't know why. It just makes it easier for me to visualize it that way. And then I'm going to drag it over here to my brush palette. I'm going to make this an art brush. Click OK. And then this is the key for when you're creating brushes that you're going to color later, is you need to make sure that under Method, you're going to click Tints. Hit OK. And now we have, we've created a brush. So if I draw out a line, I can apply that brush to it. And because we made it tints, what that means is that we can now color that any way we want. So just by changing the stroke color, I can now change it to use it in any color that's in my color palette. If you have any questions, drop them in here. I'll be happy to answer them for you as well. General Kenobi is back. Awesome. We've got some other folks back. Carol, Rob. So Carol just asked about tints and shades. That's a great question. Let me go back over here. I'm going to go back into my brushes. I'm going to double click my brushes. And let's try that. Let's try tints and shades and see what happens. So when I click tints and shades, my brush goes back to black. So what's great about tints, my understanding about the way this works is tints basically is telling you that if something is 100% black, then it will be 100% of whatever color you assign it. So for instance, let's see if we can do this real quick. I'm going to hit OK. I'm going to take this brush and let's make it a lighter color. Let's add, let's see. Let's go with a light gray. Okay. So if our color is light gray with the brush, when I drag and drop it, let's drag and drop it in. I'm gonna option drag it over top. So it's going to replace the old one. You'll see that it has tints on here. If I hit OK and I hit apply to strokes, you'll see that the color of the stroke, the color of the brush took on the tint of this color. So that is why tints work best for me and every time that I've seen it. And it's the way that I use it as well. Hi, Designer Hub. Nice to see you. Hey, Frank. Hey, Sam. Nice to see you guys. Rob. So I'm going to go through here and kind of show you that's exactly how I created all of the brushes in this pack that I'm using. So for instance, like this is just simply a black shape. I just repeated these patterns around. Same here. So really it's just a matter of making a black version of it. Then you're going to add the amount of roughen you want, drag and drop that puppy right into your brushes palette and you're good to go. And now you have something you can use. And you can change the size of it simply by changing the stroke width. So you can knock this down to like 0.5, get a smaller brush, and you can do all sorts of fun stuff just by curving it different ways. You can curve it this way. That's kind of fancy like that. But that's exactly how you create the single color brushes. So the other brushes that I like to create, and you'll notice these up here, I have two of them. I've got this blue one and I've kind of got this green one here. Essentially, it's kind of the same way, except what we're going to do is we're going to put them as brushes in as the actual colors that they are. So let me, my favorite way to draw a heart is to create a rectangle, and I'm going to skew it to 45 degrees or rotate it to 45 degrees. I'm going to hit my A button and direct select these corners and make that rounded. And then I'm just going to option drag that one out, transform, reflect, vertical. And then we're going to go like that. And then what I'm going to do, just go over here in my Pathfinder tool. We'll divide this thing up. I know there's a way to use this with the other command or the other Pathfinder tool, but I haven't adapted that quite yet, and I need to. It's something I need to work on. But I just like to go through here and just delete those other pieces and then just go ahead and hit the unite button. And then to go through and add these little notches in, create some rectangles, kind of do the same thing. I'm going to grab those two corners, bring the corners in. Option drag. Option drag. We'll tuck this one in kind of near the bottom. So those could both get a little bit bigger. All right, so let's say this is our leaf. I'm going to grab those, Command 8. We want to make sure that we go to Object, Compound Path, Make. We want to make sure that those are compound paths, not just grouped. I'm going to Shift Option drag those over to the right, reflect. Oh, that's interesting. That one decided when I reflected it to not curve the bottom side. We can fix that though. That's easy to fix. So we'll just do that. So grab those, Command 8 again, and then I'm going to center those up. And then I'm going to just go ahead and use my Pathfinder tool and punch the top one, use the minus front, get that shape. And then I'm going to use my direct select tool, kind of grab these corners right here, round those. Grab that corner there. We're going to round that up. So you can kind of see how I'm building this just using basic shapes to really kind of like create something that has a little bit of a geometric, shape to the whole thing. Let's see here. I'm going to grab my shape tool and polygon tool. We'll make that a triangle. So that's kind of how I would go through and make the outer shape of my leaves. So I'm going to just go ahead and grab one of these that's ready-made and show you the way that I add some of the shading in here real quick. So if I grab a leaf and pull it out of here. Let's see here. Robert says Hawk is way faster. I don't know. Maybe we should challenge each other. It wouldn't surprise me. Andrew's an Adobe master and Adobe whiz. But what I like to do is basically create two different shapes here. So here's my base shape. here are some brushes that I overlaid and expanded. So all you have to do is kind of grab a brush. I have some over here. They're kind of pre-made brushes that I have. And I'm going to make these that lighter green color. And remember, by kind of overlaying the tints of the different brushes that I created, by kind of changing the opacity, you can just get some really nice lighter greens out of this. I'm gonna make sure the fill is set to none. And then also what I'll do is I'm going to create a duplicate of this, copy paste in front, and I'm going to just kind of split this down the middle so that it divides the leaf in half. So select that, those two pieces, and we're going to go to intersect. Now I have a different piece over here. You can kind of see how I did that. I'm going to overlay these brushes, one here, one here. Let's rotate this so we kind of get the other side of it in here. Grab those two. Because I want to use them again, I'm going to option drag them off to the side. Let's just go ahead and expand these. Object, expand appearance, join them in the Pathfinder, and then I'm going to hit Command 8 again. I want to make sure that that's a compound path. I'm going to select both of these, and we are going to click the intersect button, which this is something that happens all the time. I don't know how many of you see this little error that pops up where it says the filter produced no results. Really, really great little hack for that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually hold the Option key down while I click the intersect, and it's going to make the intersect for me. And then I hit expand and it does it anyways. So I'm not sure why it does that sometimes, but it does. So that's a nice little pro tip there for you on how to get past that annoying little error when it pops up sometimes. So I'm going to do the same thing over here. We're just going to add a little bit of texture to the leaves on this side. We're going to expand these, object, expand. Command 8. And then I'm going to do copy in front, copy, paste in front, and we're going to intersect this one as well. So now I have these kind of these highlights for the leaves. Go over here to the transparency, and I'm going to knock that down to like 45%. And now we have our leaf. And so what you can do now is what I like to do is just kind of make a duplicate, and then we'll just take one of these and we're going to make it blue. Now we have a blue leaf, we have a green leaf. We can just drag and drop those right into our brush palette, and you can see I have those both right here. I've got my blue leaf and my green leaf. Super, super simple. In that situation, because these are not these are not single color leaves, you're not going to want to set any sort of colorization mode. You're just going to leave it as it is, and you're just going to use it like that. So let me just go ahead and do one of those real quick. I'm going to just grab him, turn him to the right. I'm going to drag and drop, and we're going to make this an art brush. Hit OK. And now when I draw out a curve, I have a nice leaf that works with that. So that is exactly how I go ahead and create those brushes as well. So let's hop over here real quick. Let's talk about our character and how we create the character for our book. And so one of the things I did was I got on, here's some hippos that I pulled off of Adobe stock. One of the things I like about the hippo is it kind of looks like a bean. If you would think about like a kidney bean or some kind of like bean you would pull out of your soup, they kind of look like that if you squint. And so what I decided to do is really kind of base my whole character on this shape of a bean. So anytime there's an action, any type of motion in one way or the other, I like to kind of create that bean and give it some action. You'll notice on my sketch here on the left, this is my pencil sketch of my character, that I like to have this continuous line that runs as like an action line that runs all the way up the side of my character that runs up like this. And also I like to kind of sketch just where my center line is. It helps me to know where to kind of place the mouth, where the belly's going to be, where the eyes are going to sit, all of that as well. It helps me also kind of think about like that leg is going to be sitting behind. Well, this leg is actually going to be in the front. Same with the arms. You know, what's going to be in the front, what's going to be in the back. So one of the first things I do is I will go ahead and bring my sketch in here to Illustrator, and I create it on a separate layer. Typically call it the sketch layer. I know that's incredibly pithy of me. Let me just go ahead here and lock that layer down. Actually, before I lock it down, what I'm going to do is set it to multiply, set the opacity to like maybe 14%, like that. And then I'm just going to go ahead and lock that layer down. And then I just draw right over it. I'm going to make sure I'm on the right layer here. The fewer points that you create with your Bezier curves, the better. And I like to try to find the far edges, the extreme points of the different shapes that I'm drawing. So let me fill this with my color so you can kind of see what I'm doing here. But you'll notice that I try my best. You can't always do it, but in a lot of situations, I like to be able to just pull my handles straight out and straight up and straight out. I'm sorry, to the left or right, or straight up and straight out from vertical. So let's pick up where we left off here. I'm gonna pull this, continue to pull this one out, drop it there. If you don't know this when you're using the Bezier curves, if you don't go back and click your last point and you've pulled a handle out, you'll notice that it's going to want to kind of draw another line out this way, and it's going to continue that. If you just simply click that node again, it gets rid of the second handle and allows you to continue drawing. So we'll just go from here to here. And I'm just going to bring it up like that for now, because we're going to actually create a separate shape for the snout. So roughly that's how I start to create my shapes. And one of the things I like to do when I'm doing this is make sure that as I create each of the shapes, so if I'm going to create the arm, for instance, I want to keep it separate. And here's why. A lot of times people at this point will combine these two shapes in the Pathfinder. But if you do that, yes, these hippos are definitely hungry. And it is an analogy for National Chili Day. I would not want to be around a hippopotamus that had chili for lunch. No, that would be bad. That would be very, very bad. Keep the chili away from the large animals, the large jungle animals. So yeah, so basically if you create your other shapes, keep them separate. And the reason I do that is because if I were to combine these two shapes into one, and I wanted to maybe adjust something slightly, maybe the arm wasn't quite where I wanted it. If I made this point here and this point here, in fact, let's just go ahead and do it. I'm going to just go over here and combine those shapes. Let's say I want to now move this arm a little bit, and I want to kind of change where it goes. So now I'm going to come down here and oh shoot, now I'm thrown off my curve going up here. And now if I'm bringing it down farther down like this, now I'm throwing off this curve down at the bottom. You do not want to have to mess with that. What's really great about keeping all of these shapes as separate shapes is the ability to just kind of always be able to just go through and shift it around, change it to where you want as you go through. So keeping these all separate. Yes, clever. You should make an illustrated children's book. What are you waiting for? Like I said, I always wanted to do one. I just didn't have a good story until my friend Beth came along, and I was like, okay, this I have to do. And hope, I don't know that we'll ever make back the amount of time that either of us invested into putting into it, but we sure did have a lot of joy from seeing it in people's hands. And the first book came out right before the pandemic. The second book actually was on the Kickstarter the first month of the pandemic. We couldn't have timed that any worse. But what was really cool is we got loads and loads of photos from parents who were sending in pictures of their kids reading it while they were locked in the house during the pandemic. And that was really, really encouraging to us to know that our books were in kids' hands and making them happy as well. So Sam's asked if I have any major lessons learned or takeaways from Kickstarter. I do, actually. One of the things is that Kickstarter is a great platform, but it doesn't do all the work for you. There's a lot of work to be done. I think a lot of people think that you basically just throw it up there and see what happens, but it is a constant state of, I'm just going to go ahead and make a new ear there. It is a constant state of monitoring it, putting in updates, blasting stuff to social media. We were fortunate to get on a bunch of podcasts when we were doing it, and all of that helps. So anything you can do as far as getting on a podcast, one of the things we did find out is that podcasters love talking about new books. And so that was one of the areas we were able to get a lot of leverage and a lot of traction on. But Kickstarter itself is really just a platform for funding. It really doesn't do a whole lot more than that for you. And you will find yourself in a place where if you think that you can just throw something up there and expect it to work, you will be sad. It doesn't work that well for that purpose. But yeah. And the other thing I would say, if you're going to do a Kickstarter campaign, you should always make sure that you take into account all of your expenses, all of your shipping expenses, everything. I've seen multiple people get into creating getting into their campaigns and then finding out later that they didn't take that into account, and it completely, they go broke because they realize that in order to fulfill all the orders, they didn't take all that stuff into account, like everything, even the packaging that you're going to send your books out in, all of that stuff. So yeah. And Sam asked if I had a mailing list that I tried to get a certain size. We didn't really do that, but we did do a lot of we did a lot of like stuff on social media where we were sending it out and kind of like anticipating. We also did email like everybody we knew, and we let them know that it was coming up and said, like, this is when it's going to launch. We're excited. Hopefully you're going to back this for us. And just so the day of, just to let people know, that it's out there to share on their social media platforms. And that really helped us out a lot too. So you have to lay a lot of groundwork before you launch it as well, and let a lot of people know what's coming before it actually launches. So the next step I do after I've kind of built out my base shape, and I'm just going to jump ahead here just a little bit. And I've created my silhouette shape, for instance. Something I mentioned yesterday that the brilliant Walt Disney said is that you should be able to tell from a silhouette what your character is. And so if you create a silhouette of a character and you can't tell what it is or what it's doing, you're probably starting off on the wrong foot. You really want to make sure that when you create your illustrations of your characters, that first sketch, that first drawing, those basic shapes really kind of help you land on being able to know like which way it's facing and all of that stuff. So the next thing I'll do is I'll basically create the inner shapes, the shapes that are going to lay on top. And so I'll just go through here and we'll build these out. Throw like dark purple color on there. I think I might be in the wrong layer. So let me make sure I lock my sketch layer again. Let's go back over here to the hippo. And then for these inner shapes like the tongue, I'm actually just going to go ahead and create another shape that overlaps. And we will fill that with this pink color. I call it hippo pink. You'll never guess why. Copy that, paste in front. And we'll hit the intersect button. And of course, I'm going to have to color it pink again because I did that. And I just basically go through and start creating all my individual shapes. Another thing that I do, sort of like with the arms, I like to keep my eyes as basic shapes as well. So let's go ahead and just use this oval. But what I'm going to do when I get to that cheek is I'm just going to overlay a shape on it. And I'm just going to leave it that way. Because once again, you never know when you actually start dialing in everything and you've got all your shading in place and all that stuff, you realize, man, I wish I hadn't done that where I like used path operations on that eye and made it harder to edit later. So we'll just do this, copy, paste in front. We'll give a nice little white highlight. Like that. And then, like I said, I'll just create a shape. We're just going to lay it over top. So that way, if we decide later that, we want to change the expression or that maybe that eye needs to be looking a different direction, we can do that easily. And I haven't taken that chunk out of the bottom of the eye there. For the ear, we have this inner shape that kind of sits inside, kind of like a shadow. Copy the bottom shape, paste in front, and intersect. Make that dark purple as well. So in this step, I'm basically going through, and what's important is that you're not doing anything that has lines at all. And I'll explain why here in a second, but you do not want to do anything with any outlines at this point. We're only blocking in shapes at this point. Just going to reflect that nostril. Going to bring it over here, make it a little bit smaller since it's back a little farther. And then even like the teeth and all that stuff, we'll just go ahead and we'll block those all in. Very simple, very basic shapes. Holding the Option key and it does not want to. We'll just redraw a new tooth. It wasn't that difficult. So once you get through this process here of kind of blocking in and creating all the shapes, then we're going to get to the fun part. And that is we're going to create the Roughen effect and do some shading. So the reason that we do it this way is after we've got all of our shapes together, you're going to select everything, your whole character here, and you're going to apply Roughen across it universally. So if you look over here in my appearances, I have Roughen already set. I'm just going to delete it so you can kind of see what this looks like before. But that's kind of where we were. And then I'm going to go ahead and apply that Roughen the way we did it before. Effects. And you can actually just go to Roughen. It was one of the more recent ones that I chose. Actually, because I wasn't selecting it, it didn't work very well. So let's go back up here, Effect, Roughen. And I'm gonna dial this down to 0.01. Add a little bit more detail. And there you go. It just gives a much more like soft analog sort of feel. It just kind of makes the whole illustration feel a lot more hand-drawn and less vectory clip arty, which we're trying to avoid at all costs. So next step is to go ahead and add in my brushes to do some outlines. I'll go through here with my brushes like this. I have a brush that I created called, they're Sharpie brushes, and I actually made them out of a pack of Sharpies. And I love using them. I use them all the time to kind of do my outlining. So we'll just go ahead and use one of my Sharpie brushes here. Gonna make that dark, hippo dark color. See how that went there. Yeah, so it kind of goes, actually, let's tap my direct select tool, and we're going to get rid of that last node and kind of add in bottom of the mouth. One of the things that's also great about using art brushes is that it gives you the flexibility and the ability to do some tapering of these. So it kind of makes it look nice when it looks like you kind of lifted the pen at the end. So I'm just going to grab my taper tool, my width tool, just kind of taper the end a little bit. Just make it look a little bit more like the brush, the pen went across and it got lifted kind of at the end there. And it just gives a nice little effect to the whole thing. And then I also have one that kind of goes across here. Now, when I do brushes, when I create brushes, I make different lengths of them because the last thing you want is one that looks totally crunched in there. So I'm going to actually use the same exact brush. Well, it's a different brush. It's from the same brush set, but it's actually the short version of it. So it kind of matches the same texture as the longer one. And that's important when you're creating brushes, to make sure that you do multiple lengths of the same brush. Otherwise, it will look really, really crunchy and gross. Same for the other way around. If you use a short brush that you created and then you're going to go the other way, it just looks really bizarre. And then also, I will use it here to kind of create this highlight with the pink as well. So I've used the highlights, the pink highlights, to really kind of pull that color to the foreground, to pull these shapes to the foreground. And then I'm going to dial it back just a little bit so that it's not quite as stark. Like that. And then I'll just taper up the end of that one as well. So by adding those, it allows you to kind of define these shapes really nicely. You can bring one down between the eyes right here, for instance, to kind of make sure that front of that bump of the eye. Another place I would bring a brush down here, for instance, is a line that comes down like this. And the reason is it visually brings that to the foreground as well. That arm. So I'm going to jump real quick ahead here. We don't have a lot of time left, and kind of show you something else I did here. And that is when I create colors or shapes within shapes, this really handy little tool over here under the color, under the stroke and fill, there's 3 little buttons there. The one farthest to the right is draw inside. Now, I've already done that, but if you create any shape and you hit draw inside, whatever you start drawing next is going to fill in the object that you've selected, which is super, super cool. I just recently came across it, and I'm really, really glad I did. And so what I did was I basically just drew a circle, and I applied a scatter brush that I have around the edge to create that texture in there. So all that is simply just a scatter brush on a circle. And I have gone to the color inside feature over there and created that inside there. And then when you just double click off of it, you'll notice that that's actually a part of this this shape, which is a lot better than kind of like duplicating the shape, creating a layer mask or creating a clipping mask, pasting it inside. Now you've got all these other things that are nested and laying on top of each other, and that can get super, super confusing. Really great little feature there with the color inside, and that'll help you out a ton. And then also, I'll just take some of my other scatter brushes, for instance, this one here, and just kind of overlay some of the darker purples and create some cool brushes as well, like this. So you can kind of see how that works and overlays there as well. So that's how I did it. That is about all the time we have left today. But I just wanted to kind of bring you back up here to this last illustration, kind of show you like that's kind of a lot of the assets we created today all put into one place, and it's super exciting. I hope you guys get a chance to use a lot of it. Like I said, that's all we have for today. Stay tuned for the pro tip segment that is coming up with Delta Tango Mike next, and have a great day. Don't be a stranger, and I hope to meet you guys someday. Thanks. Have a great day.